as the Okoye family gathered for their annual Thanksgiving. The long wooden table was covered with steaming dishes, roasted turkey shining golden brown, bowls of spicy jollof rice filling the air with pepper and tomato, and yam porridge so smooth it melted in the mouth. Children ran around the compound, laughing and chasing each other, while the older ones clapped and joined in small games. Inside, the grown-ups were busy teasing one another, telling old stories, and raising their glasses of palm wine with cheerful toasts. The house was loud, warm, and filled with love, the kind of atmosphere that made everyone forget their troubles for one night. But sitting quietly at the edge of the table was Amaka. She smiled politely, nodding when people spoke to her, yet she hardly said much. Unlike her siblings, she never bragged about her life, her work, or her success. To most of them, she was the quiet sister, the one who kept to herself, the one nobody really paid attention to. Yet behind her calm face was a story no one could imagine. Amaka had spent years working harder than anyone knew, carrying burdens in silence, and achieving something beyond her family's wildest dreams. But tonight, surrounded by laughter, food, and love, she wanted none of that to matter. She just wanted to enjoy the feast, to be part of the joy. Little did she know, before the night ended, her secret would shake the entire family. Kelechi had always carried himself like a king. Ever since he bought his first car, he believed he was above everyone else in the family. He walked into every gathering with his chest high, his gold wristwatch flashing, his words always sprinkled with stories of his big business deals and how many important people he knew. To him, life was about showing off, and he loved reminding everyone that he was the successful son of the family. That Thanksgiving night was no different. After a few cups of palm wine, his voice grew louder, his laughter sharper, and his confidence bigger. He leaned across the long wooden table toward Amaka, who was quietly eating her food. "So, little sister," he said, smirking, "you still working that small job of yours? What do you even earn in a month? Enough to buy pepper and onions." His words dripped with mockery, and the cousins burst into laughter, waiting for Amaka to shrink. But Amaka didn't flinch. She only smiled softly, like someone who had heard this too many times before. She took a sip of water, looked down at her plate, and said nothing. Her calmness made Kelechi restless. He wanted her to defend herself, to argue back, to give him another chance to prove he was superior. The cousins nudged each other, whispering. Some laughed awkwardly, others felt uncomfortable, but no one said anything. Kelechi leaned back in his chair, shaking his head dramatically. "You see, this is the problem," he said loudly so everyone could hear. "She thinks silence makes her wise, but really, she's hiding the fact that she has nothing to say. Tell us, Amaka, what do you even have?" The room grew a little quieter, everyone's eyes moving to her. Amaka lifted her gaze, her eyes calm but steady. "Kelechi," she said softly, "not every blessing needs to be shouted from the rooftop." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that made even a few of the aunties glance at her curiously. Kelechi laughed, clapping his hands. "Listen to her. She talks like a preacher. Always so secretive, always so quiet. Maybe she hides because she has nothing worth showing." He leaned closer again, his tone sharper now. "Come on, little sister, tell us the truth. What do you really have?" Amaka's smile didn't fade. She kept her composure, refusing to be dragged into his game. Her silence only fueled Kelechi's curiosity more. He wanted to break her, to pull out whatever truth she was guarding. The cousins whispered again, some giggling, some staring. The warmth of the evening began to shift ever so slightly, like a cloud moving across the sun. And though Amaka sat still, her hands resting gently on her lap, inside her chest her heart was beating fast. She knew her brother too well, his pride, his stubbornness, his obsession with proving himself. She could sense he would not let this matter rest. What Amaka didn't know was that Kelechi's curiosity, fueled by envy and drink, was about to expose everything she had tried so hard to keep hidden. The night was rolling on with laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses. Children were dozing off in corners, the smell of roasted turkey still thick in the air, and the cousins were arguing about who could eat the most jollof rice. Amid the noise, Amaka quietly excused herself to help Grandma in the kitchen. In her rush, she left her phone on the table. Kalechi, tipsy with palm wine and restless with pride, noticed it. His eyes narrowed with mischief. "Ah, let's see what our quiet sister is hiding," he muttered under his breath. Without a second thought, he snatched the phone and unlocked it easily. No one stopped him. In fact, a few cousins leaned closer, curious about what he was up to. He scrolled carelessly through her messages, smirking as if expecting to find nothing important. But then his finger froze mid-swipe. His eyes locked on an email notification from her bank. He clicked it, and there it was, the number that nearly made his breath stop. $12,473,520. His jaw dropped. His laughter died in his throat. His hands shook so badly the phone almost slipped from his grip. For a moment, he thought maybe he was drunk, maybe his eyes were playing tricks. But the numbers didn't change. They stared back at him, louder than any words. "What is this?" he whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of shock and envy. "What did you see?" one cousin asked, peering over his shoulder. Kalechi suddenly stood, his chair scraping the floor so hard it startled the whole table. Everyone turned to him. His face was red, his eyes wild, his mouth opening and closing like he was choking on the truth. Then, with a loud voice that silenced the entire room, he shouted, "Amaka is hiding millions from us. She has over $12 million in her account." The laughter around the table vanished instantly. Plates clattered as hands froze mid-bite. A cousin dropped his fork. Another gasped so loud it echoed. The air shifted from warm to heavy in a heartbeat. Every eye turned to Amaka, who was just walking back from the kitchen, holding a tray of fruit. She stopped in her tracks, her heart slamming against her ribs. The tray shook in her hands. "What did you say?" she asked quietly, though her voice barely carried over the stunned silence. Kalechi held up the phone like it was evidence in a trial. "Don't act innocent, Amaka. We all saw it. $12 million. And you sit here like you're poor, like you're nothing." The cousins leaned forward, whispering in disbelief. Aunties covered their mouths with their hands. Even the uncles, usually calm, were staring wide-eyed. The children, sensing the tension, stood still in confusion. Amaka's face paled. She had prayed no one would ever find out, not like this, not in front of everyone. But now her secret was out in the open, dragged into the light in the cruelest way possible, by her own brother. And the night that had begun with joy was about to turn into a storm. The moment Kalechi's words hit the air, it was as if the entire room froze. The laughter that had filled the house only minutes ago vanished like smoke in the wind. Forks slipped from hands, spoons clattered against plates, and the music playing softly in the background suddenly felt out of place. Everyone turned toward Amaka, their eyes wide, their mouths half open in disbelief. $12 million, a cousin whispered, as if saying it too loudly would break the spell. "Did she win the lottery?" another muttered, leaning forward with eyes as big as saucers. Amaka stood there with the tray of fruit still in her hands, her fingers trembling so badly that an orange rolled to the floor. Her chest rose and fell quickly, her heart pounding against her ribs like a drum. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the ground, but there she was, caught in the middle of the storm, her secret exposed at the very place she had hoped to feel peace, her family's dining table. The questions began to pour in, fast and sharp. "How long have you had it? Where did you get it from? Why didn't you tell us?" Their voices overlapped, growing louder, pressing in on her from every side. The cousins who had once laughed with her now stared with envy. The aunties who had just been bragging about their new shoes now looked at her, as if she were holding the key to their every desire. Even her parents, her own mother and father, looked at her with confusion and something else she couldn't quite place. Expectation. Amaka's lips parted, but no words came out. Her throat was tight, her mind spinning. She had wanted her success to remain private, not because she was ashamed, but because she feared this exact moment. She feared greed, jealousy, and the change that money always seemed to bring. And now, all of it was happening before her eyes. Kalechi, still standing with the phone in his hand, looked at her triumphantly. "You see, I told you she was hiding something. All this time acting so quiet, so humble like she's nothing." Meanwhile, she's been sitting on millions while we suffer. His words dripped with bitterness, his voice loud enough to sting. The room felt colder, tighter. Even the children sensed the shift and stopped playing, watching the adults with wide, confused eyes. The smell of roasted turkey and jollof rice, once so comforting, now seemed heavy, almost suffocating. The feast had turned into a courtroom, the table into a witness stand, and Amaka into the accused. She lowered the tray onto the table, her hands still shaking, and finally looked up at the circle of eyes burning into her. For a second, she thought of explaining everything, of telling them the long, painful journey behind those numbers on the screen. But the weight of their stares told her something else. They weren't looking for answers. They were already thinking of what they could take. And that realization pierced her deeper than any question ever could. The silence in the room did not last long. After the shock faded, the murmurs began, low at first, then louder like a wave swelling. Eyes darted from Amaka to the phone in Kalechi's hand and back again. Everyone seemed to be calculating, imagining what $12 million could mean for them. Uncle Obinna, the eldest among them, cleared his throat and leaned forward, his deep voice filling the tense space. "Since family must share blessings," he said slowly, "it is only right you help us, Amaka. That is what family is for." His tone was calm, but there was no mistaking the demand hidden in his words. The aunties, who only moments ago were enjoying their food, nodded quickly in agreement. One of them clasped her hands dramatically. "Yes, my daughter, you know my son has been struggling. With this money you can buy him land to build a house. Is that not what a good sister does?" Another chimed in, her voice rising with excitement. "We can finally have peace in this family if you share. Look at us. We are all suffering while you hide millions." The cousins, too, leaned forward, their eyes shining with greedy dreams. "I need a new car," one whispered under his breath. "If she helps me, I can start my own business," another said, already picturing the lifestyle he could have. The room buzzed with want, their voices overlapping, each person shouting over the other as if Amaka was already their personal bank. Then came Kalechi's voice, sharp and heavy, slamming against the wooden table with his palm. The plates jumped from the force, and everyone fell quiet. "You owe us, Amaka," he shouted, his eyes blazing. "Without this family you would be nothing. You think you built yourself alone. You ate from this house, you grew up under this roof, and now you want to hide millions. Hand it over. All of it belongs to us." His words hit Amaka like stones. She felt her chest tighten, her hands trembling on her lap. The table that had once been a place of laughter and love now felt like a courtroom, and she was on trial. Every pair of eyes locked on her, not with affection but with hunger. Even her parents, the two people she thought might defend her, sat silently. Her father shifted uncomfortably in his chair, while her mother's eyes, filled with confusion, lingered on her. There was no anger in their gaze, but there was expectation, an unspoken question of why she had not come to them first. Amaka swallowed hard, her throat dry. The room around her spun with voices of demand, greed, and entitlement. They were not asking anymore. They were claiming, as if her hard work, her sleepless nights, her sacrifices belonged to them by birthright. She wanted to scream, to tell them that money did not erase the years of loneliness, the tears shed in silence, the battles fought alone. But as she sat there, surrounded by her own blood, she realized something painful. They did not want her story. They only wanted her fortune. The room that once rang with laughter now thundered with voices, each one louder than the other. Everyone spoke at once, their words flying across the table like arrows. "Buy me land," one cousin shouted, his eyes bright with desperation. "Pay my debts," another demanded, banging his fist on the table. "Help me start my business," cried a third, already dreaming of the cars and status he would gain. The noise was deafening. It was no longer a family gathering. It was a marketplace, with everyone shouting their price, everyone bargaining for a piece of her. Amaka sat still, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her throat tightening as the storm around her grew. She could hardly breathe. The faces she loved, the cousins she had played with as a child, the aunties who had fed her, the uncles who had once cheered for her, were now strangers, their eyes filled not with love but with greed. And then, the hardest blow of all came from the people she least expected, her parents. Her father, who usually stayed quiet, leaned forward with a serious face. "Amaka," he said slowly, "you know we are your parents. Should you not have come to us first? Should we not benefit from your blessings?" Her mother nodded beside him, her voice soft but heavy with expectation. "You have more than enough, my daughter. Why keep it hidden? Share it with us. Is family not everything?" Amaka's eyes burned with unshed tears. She wanted to scream, "Family is everything, but what do you call this?" Did they not remember the time she had already helped? The time she had quietly paid her cousin's school fees? The time she had sent money for hospital bills? The time she had gone without so others could have? She had given in silence, expecting nothing in return, but tonight it was as though none of it ever happened. Instead of gratitude, there was greed. Instead of love, there was entitlement. It felt like all her sacrifices had been swallowed up and forgotten, replaced by a hunger that nothing could satisfy. The demands grew fiercer. "You owe us," someone shouted. "If you don't share, you are selfish," another cried. Her brother Kelechi's voice cut through the chaos. "You think this money belongs to you alone. You would not be here if not for this family. We made you who you are. And now, you want to enjoy while we suffer. Never." His fist pounded the table again, rattling the plates. Amaka's chest heaved as she struggled to stay calm. The walls seemed to close in, her heartbeat loud in her ears. It felt like everyone she loved had turned into a judge, pointing fingers, accusing, demanding. She had dreamed of Thanksgiving being a time of peace, love, and togetherness. Instead, it had become her worst nightmare. And as she looked around the table, she realized the truth. Her greatest blessing had turned into a curse in the eyes of the people she called family. Amaka could feel her whole body shaking. Tears filled her eyes, blurring the angry faces around her. But when she finally spoke, her voice came out steady and clear. She had been silent for too long. "I worked for this," she said, her words cutting through the noise. "I sacrificed for years. I owe no one my life's earnings." For a moment, the room went completely quiet. Even the cousins who had been shouting demands fell still. Her voice carried a weight they had never heard from her before. But instead of softening their hearts, it seemed to light another fire. Kelechi leaned forward, his lip curling into a sneer. "Ungrateful girl," he spat. "You think you're better than us now?" His chair scraped harshly against the floor as he pushed himself up. The sound was sharp, making the younger cousins flinch. He stood tall, his body tense, his face twisted with envy and rage. He slammed his fist on the table so hard that the cups rattled and the roasted turkey shifted on its tray. His eyes burned into Amaka's like flames, daring her to look away. "You would have nothing without this family," he shouted. "We carried you when you were small, we fed you, we clothed you, and now you repay us with arrogance." His words dripped with venom, each one louder than the last. Amaka met his glare, her chest rising and falling with each shaky breath. "This money is not arrogance, Kelechi. It is blood, sweat, and sleepless nights. It is every sacrifice I made when no one believed in me. You don't know the pain I carried, the things I endured to reach here." Her words cracked, and a single tear rolled down her cheek, but she refused to break. The cousins shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure whether to support Kelechi or stay silent. The aunties exchanged nervous glances, whispering behind their hands. Even her parents looked torn, caught between love for their daughter and the pull of expectation. But Kelechi was relentless. His voice rose, sharp and ugly. "Stop pretending you're some saint. If you had really sacrificed, you would have shared it already. You're selfish, Amaka. You've turned your back on your own blood." He slammed the table again, this time leaning forward so close that it felt like he was about to pounce. The tension in the room grew unbearable. No one dared to move, no one dared to breathe. Amaka's tears flowed freely now, but her voice didn't shake. "I love this family," she whispered, her words breaking the silence. "But love does not mean surrendering my soul. I gave what I could in silence, and still you call me selfish. What more do you want, my life?" The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the sound of Amaka's uneven breaths. For the first time, everyone could feel the rawness of her pain. But Kalechi's rage only deepened, his pride unwilling to let her words stand. And in that moment, it seemed the family was standing on the edge of something that could not be undone. Kalechi's voice was rising higher and higher, his fists pounding on the table as if he wanted to break it in half. The room felt like it would explode. Amaka stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, her chest tight with pain. No one dared to speak. No one dared to stop him. And then crack. The sharp sound of a cane striking the floor cut through the chaos. Everyone jumped. The room fell into stunned silence as all eyes turned toward the corner, where Grandma Igioma stood. Her frail frame was wrapped in a faded wrapper, her gray hair tied neatly, her wrinkled face glowing with authority. She had been silent the whole evening, watching, listening, her old eyes seeing more than anyone realized. But now, her voice thundered like a storm. "Enough!" she commanded, her cane trembling in her hand but her words strong as iron. The cousins quickly straightened in their chairs. The aunties lowered their heads, and even the uncles who rarely feared anyone went quiet. Kalechi froze mid-shout, his mouth still open, but no words came out. Grandma's eyes burned as she swept her gaze around the table. "Have you all forgotten?" she began, her voice steady and sharp. "When you were sick, who paid your hospital bills? When your children had no books, who provided them with school fees? When your roofs leaked and your debts piled high, who quietly came to your rescue?" Her cane struck the floor again, echoing through the room. It was Amaka, this quiet child, who spoke nothing of her struggles, carried all of you in silence. And today this is how you repay her. By shaming her. By demanding what you did not earn. Her words cut deeper than any knife. The room shifted instantly. The cousins who had shouted demands now lowered their eyes in guilt. The aunties who had been dreaming of houses and cars fidgeted with their wrappers, too ashamed to speak. Even Amaka's parents, who had looked at her with expectation only minutes ago, could not hold back their tears. Her father's eyes glistened, her mother wiped her face with the edge of her scarf. But Grandma was not done. She turned her sharp gaze on Kalechi, who was still standing stiff, his fists clenched. "And you, Kalechi," she said, her voice heavy with disappointment. "You call her ungrateful. You accuse her of pride. Tell me, when was the last time you helped this family without boasting? When did you give without making noise? You drink palm wine and beat your chest, but what have you built? Your sister built quietly, and you call her selfish." Kalechi's jaw tightened, his eyes darting around the table, but no one came to his defense. For once, his power over the family was broken. Amaka, standing with tears streaming down her cheeks, felt her grandmother's words wrap around her like a shield. For the first time that night, she did not feel alone. The weight of every accusation began to lift, replaced by the strength of truth spoken by the one person no one dared to challenge. And as Grandma Igioma raised her chin proudly, her voice softened. "We give thanks on this day, not for money, but for love and for sacrifice. Amaka has shown both, more than anyone. Remember that before you let greed destroy this family." Her words hung in the air, heavy and unshakable. No one dared to move. No one dared to speak. The greed that had poisoned the room seemed to vanish, replaced by guilt that no one could hide. The room was quiet, heavy with shame. Grandma Igioma's words still hung in the air like thunder after a storm, and no one dared to argue. Faces that had only moments ago glowed with greed were now lowered, eyes fixed on the table. The aunties who had eagerly begged for houses and cars stared down at their plates, too embarrassed to meet Amaka's gaze. Their voices, once loud with demands, had vanished into silence. The cousins shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, their fingers nervously picking at crumbs on the table. A few of them whispered apologies under their breath, their earlier excitement now replaced with guilt. They remembered the times Amaka had quietly covered their school fees, bought their uniforms, and even paid for their exams. None of them had ever thanked her. Not once. Even her parents, who had looked at her with expectation, now sat trembling. Her father's eyes filled with tears as he stared at his hands, ashamed that he had allowed greed to cloud his love for his daughter. Her mother wept silently, dabbing her eyes with the edge of her wrapper. They had raised Amaka to be strong, kind, and selfless, and she had lived up to that. But instead of celebrating her, they had joined the crowd in demanding more. Amaka stood quietly, her hands clasped in front of her, her cheeks still wet with tears. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The truth was written in every face around the table. For the first time they all saw her, not just as the quiet sister, but as the one who had carried them all without recognition. But one person refused to bow his head. Kalechi stood stiff, his fists clenched, his jaw tight. His face was red with anger, his eyes burning with envy. He refused to look away, refused to admit fault. "Don't be fooled," he muttered bitterly. "She hides money, and now you all worship her. She thinks she is above us, and you let her." His voice trembled with rage, but it sounded weak against the silence in the room. No one answered him. Not a single cousin supported him, not an auntie, not even his parents. For once, the power he had always held over the family with his loud voice and pride had crumbled. His words fell flat, drowned by the truth of Grandma's reminder and the weight of Amaka's sacrifices. The shame in the room was thick, pressing down on everyone like a heavy blanket. Some couldn't even look at Amaka, knowing how cruelly they had treated her. Others stole quick glances at her, their eyes softening with regret. The same people who had shouted, "You owe us," only moments ago now sat speechless, realizing how blind they had been. Amaka, though her heart still ached, felt a strange strength rise within her. For the first time, the truth was no longer hidden. Her sacrifices had finally been seen, even if it took her family's shame to bring it to light. And in that silence, she understood. Sometimes it takes breaking a family apart to show them what love really means. Amaka slowly rose to her feet, her eyes red from crying but her voice steady and calm. The room was still heavy with silence, every face turned toward her, waiting for what she would say. She looked around at her family, at the cousins who had demanded, the aunties who had begged, her parents who had expected, and her brother who still glared with anger. Then she spoke softly, but her words carried power. "We celebrate Thanksgiving to be grateful, not greedy," she said. "This day is about love, not money. I will not let wealth destroy what should bind us together. I will not let money be bigger than family." The words sank deep into the room. Some lowered their eyes in shame, others wiped quiet tears. Grandma Igioma nodded proudly, her old eyes glistening, and when Amaka stepped forward to hug her, the old woman held her tight, whispering, "My child, you have spoken the truth." That night, something changed in the Okoye family. The shame, the greed, the fighting, it all became a memory they would never forget. People in Sukka would later tell the story of that Thanksgiving, not because of the turkey or the jollof rice, not because of the palm wine or the music, but because of what happened at the table. They would say, "At Thanksgiving in the Okoye house, it was not food or drink that filled the room, but truth." And Amaka, though her heart was bruised, walked away stronger than before. She had faced her family, their greed, their anger, their judgment, and she had not broken. She left that night with her head held high, carrying not just her wealth, but her dignity,